Good evening, everyone. My name's Mark. I'm a student of Tara Institute. Hello, how are you? So this is week 4 in May, so I've got one more week to go. So it seems to be getting a bit colder because we're all rugged up, and Damien kindly put the heater on, so that's good for us. But so tonight, first thing, actually, I'll ask: is anyone new to Tara Institute? New to Monday nights? Yep, 3. Okay, a few. And I can see from the rest of you, I've seen your faces before, so you're experienced students, so it's good. So anyway, we'll be covering some new concepts, and also going over some of the things that topics covered before. So this is Introduction to Buddhism, so covering a lot of topics from a Buddhist perspective. So you might have heard these concepts before, like the law of cause and effect. So I'll be giving a particularly Buddhist perspective and what that means, and also rebirth, what that means from a Buddhist perspective. Also what happiness means from a Buddhist perspective, and what suffering, how suffering is classified. So the first thing is, with all of us here, we're here for about an hour, so it's very good to establish a good internal motivation for being here. So whatever that could be, whether it's to bring ourselves happiness, bring happiness for others, reduce our suffering, etc. It's very good to internalise that, whatever that is for you. So why do we do that is because through this period where we're going to be listening, thinking about and meditating on the topics, we create virtue or merit by having good motivation, and then for that period of time we're generating merit. We're not actually creating suffering for ourselves or others. So that's something important to understand, that the activity that we're doing now, if we've got a good motivation, it's more than likely going to lead to a positive result. So we can extrapolate that to every activity we do, not just here in the meditation hall. So if we start our activity with a good motivation, we'll generally get a good result, even if there's a few sort of obstacles in the way. That determination and motivation will help us. So that's a core tenet of Buddhism, is that a positive action will lead to a positive result. So if we look at that, it's quite sometimes it's not that easy to see that a positive action will lead to a positive result. So I've used this example before. So I've given someone $10. Will I receive $100? A few moments later, because I've created a fantastic cause there. Will the result be money coming my way? Just using that as an example. No? So in Buddhism there's this interplay of what's cause and effect and what's karma. So we're saying, okay, I've created the cause for a good result by being generous to someone. They needed the money, so I said, here's $10. If, say, $100 comes my way, generally we would say, well, it could be the result of that good action, but it's more than likely the result of a previous good action ripening at that point. So if you think about it that way, you can understand how, look at that person, they're so immoral, evil, this and that, and yet they have wealth, power, lots of good things around them. You think, well, how could that be if their actual persona is that bleak and miserable? How can all these externally good things be happening. So we say that that's the interplay there, that the cause you create now might not ripen immediately. It can. So you could experience through this life, obviously you will, the ripening effects of previous actions you've created. And if you've created lots of good actions in the past, then it'll likely that or inevitable the results will be good coming your way. So the opposite's true as well. I could steal $10 off someone. Does that mean in the not too distant future someone steals off me? Maybe, yes, but it's difficult. It's quite a subtle topic because you're going, well, I've stolen. It's a negative action created. Will the result ripen for me immediately or in the near future, or will it be stored for another time? And what happens is perhaps someone does steal from me, but it might be the effect of a previous action of stealing. So it's a little bit. It's not as, if you like, transparent as you think. That you cause effect straight away. It occurs. So it's quite different. But it's good to study it yourself to see how it works. So, with cause and effect, or the law of karma, comes the idea of a rebirth. So, how does that? Well, what does that matter now? Because we're here, but we say that eventually, we're going to die. So, in the Buddhist philosophy is, well, once you die, something will ripen, and you'll be reborn again as something, as someone. And what determines what that rebirth will be? Essentially, it's whatever is the most significant at that moment ripening karma. Whatever ripens at that point. So, if so I'll use this example again of if I gave $10 and then lived my life and all that, and then I died, and if somehow that ripened at that point when I'm about to die, what would the result generally be? Would it be a good rebirth, if that was the most significant throwing karma, if you like? Would it be a good rebirth or perhaps a not so good rebirth? Good? Positive?
Surely you couldn't say it in one instance.
What's that?
Surely you couldn't say it in one instance.
I'm just using that as an example because yeah.
If you use that as an example, okay, you'd say, yeah, that's a good thing, it would be water, a good thing, but to say the rebirth would be good, if you like to use just one example, because that could go with a string of negative things you've done.
Yeah. So we can see that's a very good answer. So generally, me being generous, if that was the ripening karma at the point of my death, you'd say that, oh well, the result's going to be good for Mark. He'll get some sort of good rebirth. But the sting is, if there's a lot of other negative karma being carried around by me, I could get a good rebirth, but with lots of suffering. That I could have lots of illness or bad conditions, and my mind's not so good, so I could still get a good, say, a human rebirth, but the conditions may not be that favourable. So it's important to think about that, because you go, should we be creating virtue or creating merit, positive energy? Yes, because that helps you. If you create lots of non-virtuous actions, then they're also stored on our mental continuum, and they could ripen as well. So So it was a sort of a balancing act. They were trying to go, okay, let's... And why we do that is, why we talk about that is that it's not random. So we're not born here randomly. It's through causes and conditions. So that's another thing. Even in this life, you go, oh, okay, Mark's turned up because of his parents, causes and conditions. He's got this body. He's got... So, you know, and those are the, if you like, the karma of Mark ripening. So throughout my life. So that's important to examine for each of us, I think. So on the... So I don't want to go too much into rebirth, but I'll effectively talk about... there are a few different types of rebirths. So we have a few that we call happy migrations or happy rebirths. So we could count the human rebirth as one of those. Because even though there's, on this planet there's about 8 billion of us, generally speaking they say, oh, well, it's a good place to be. Generally speaking. However, when you look at some countries and some places, even if you're born as a human, your life is full of suffering. So it's not that easy, is it, for everyone? They're not. Not everyone has the same opportunity as us or resources. So, so even a good happy migration or happy rebirth, like a human rebirth, can be, as that gentleman said, mixed. You know, it's not all just because you're born that. So it'll be fantastic. There are other rebirths where you're part of the food chain. Does anyone like to hazard what that would be? What type of rebirth would that be if you're part of a food chain? An animal, correct. An animal. So, unfortunately for animals, although, you know, we have pets and look after them, etc., and they're very loyal and loving and so on, generally speaking, a lot of animals are part of a food chain. So for us and for other animals, etc. So there's a lot of suffering for them if they're born as an animal. So even if you look at in the ocean, you know, it's a big expanse, lots of oceans, you know, little fish, and then grabbed by the bigger fish, and then it's, you know, the bigger fish grabs, you know, sort of until you get the apex predator who's not afraid of any fish in the ocean, but then they might get caught by a human. So there's sort of so if you're born in that sort of realm, what would you be living in? Would you be living in peace? If you, what would be your mindset if you were an animal in, say, the ocean? Adrenaline, yes, yeah. Well, that would be your physical state, but what would be your mental state? Fear. Did you say that? Fear, yeah, correct, fear. So you'd be constantly in fear, on edge. That, well, I'm in this dark ocean. I'm heading out of my little sort of hidey hole. Am I going to be nabbed by a bigger fish or something else? So that's there. So that can't be that. That wouldn't be very. That wouldn't be good. They're not good conditions to, you know, to have happiness, because you're part of that food chain. And the animals who are not part of the food chain, like our pets, they have, you know, as I said, they're very loyal, very well looked after, but they can't be taught how to meditate, how to remove a negative state of mind, how to cultivate a positive state of mind to that extent. So it's quite difficult for them, because I mean, some pets are really smart. Like I was looking after my daughter's kelpies, and they're working dogs, so they're so smart. But you can't teach them those things. So it's actually quite good to observe animals, because you think, well, okay, they're our companions, but they can't do what we can do. And we don't think about that out of arrogance. It's always out of respect. But it's good to look at the conditions of others and see, well, what is it like for them. There's another type of rebirth where it's characterized by grasping you can't achieve. So sometimes these are called ghosts. So in the Buddhist cosmology, there's a number of realms. So we've got these happy rebirths, which I've briefly touched on, the animals, and then just below that are these ghostly realms, or hungry ghosts they call them. So believe or don't believe, but this is just what's presented. So it is characterised by grasping for something you can't achieve. So from what I can understand, they talk about that ghost is hungry for something, whether it's food or water, but whatever it desires, it can see it, but as soon as it gets to it, it either becomes out of reach or polluted, or it turns into something else that's undesirable. So they never get their desire satisfied. So they're always in that perennial state of being hungry or grasping for the next, for whatever. So that can't be a good state either. So that's from the Buddhist point of view. So we do have ghosts in Western civilization as well. We talk about ghosts that gravitate towards buildings or theatres. So that we talk about that, and in a way, I think they must be beings who maybe they were attached or tied to that place. Maybe something bad happened to them in that place, and now they're gravitating back. They're after some sort of peace and satisfaction, but they more than likely won't get it. And in the last rebirth I'll cover, just briefly, this one is they're called miserable rebirths, very miserable. So unfortunately this one is characterised by long life, unrelenting suffering, being revived even after you've collapsed, being revived again so you can experience more suffering. So there's no break. So you think, oh well, they've beaten me to death. I'm out. And then suddenly something comes and revives you, and you think, oh great, and then it's just so that more torture can happen to you. So in Buddhist terms we call these the hells, hot and cold hells. It doesn't matter whether it's hot or cold, but you can see that it's characterised by those sorts of sufferings that are unrelenting. Long life. So you think, oh well, it's only suffering for a few minutes and I'm dead, and then but this one, they're characterised by long lives. So anyway, they're good to study because that's what the Buddhist texts talk about. Well, they're the possible rebirths you can have. If you're going to keep being reborn, you could be reborn in any of those states. If you're reborn? Okay, so because of these realms, we say, okay, you have an unhappy rebirth, a miserable rebirth, a sort of a grasping, a rebirth grasping for what you can't have, a rebirth where you're part of the food chain. So they're all rebirths in the main that are characterised by being thrown by karma, the result of your positive and negative actions. So it's just one after the other, so one rebirth after another, never ending. So you'll end, according to the Buddhist philosophy, you'll end up in any one of those realms for the next rebirth, and then after that again you'll go again. So but the Buddhist philosophy teaches that there is an end to these uncontrolled rebirths, and that is through the attainment of enlightenment or liberation. So there is an end, otherwise we'd say, well, what's the point of listening or thinking about or meditating on any of this if it doesn't make a difference to what happens? So coming back to something that the resident teacher here, Geshe Doga, said is, the peaceful mind is the happy mind. So So you say, okay, if I have a peaceful mind, it'll lead to a happy mind. And what Geshe Doga is alluding to there is, if your mind is at peace and that happiness is generated, that can become a permanent state. And that ultimately is what prevents you from taking an uncontrolled rebirth. Because at death, when you're at peace and you have happiness, there's no room for these uncontrolled, the karma to throw you into an uncontrolled rebirth to arise. So Buddhism does teach that, yes, we're in these states and we've been endlessly going through them, but it's not the ultimate state. We can be free of those uncontrolled rebirths. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, so if you don't believe in reincarnation or rebirth, so you just believe in one life, and then at death that your life's extinguished, then you don't need to worry. If that's your belief and you really examine it, you go, look, you know, from your side you're going, well, I'm dead. But the Buddhist idea is, well, at death, whether you believe or not, there's going to be a rising of a throwing karma that will propel you to your next rebirth. So in that respect, even whether you believe or don't believe, you'll still follow that chain of being reborn again. But it's good to examine, because this is where it gets tricky. You go, I'm going to examine the idea of cause and effect. A positive action leads to a positive result, a negative action leads to a negative result, and then by extrapolation I'm going to examine whether the idea of rebirth is true. A positive action will lead to a positive rebirth and vice versa. And then the next one is, well, is there a way out of that that's permanent? A permanent state of happiness where you're not being flung into another rebirth. Yeah.
All they care about is making as much money, for example, as possible.
Yep.
Trample over everyone in their way, they get to the end of their life, and just before they go, they actually feel quite satisfied. They think, well, I got what I wanted. See you later. In the Buddhist theory, what would happen?
It was the same. Yeah. In using an example of someone who not necessarily religious and quite dog eat dog, wants to get what they want, the same principle applies. If you're in from the Buddhist point of view, you go, at death, whatever the throwing karma that ripens, that will project that person to their next rebirth. So whatever is strongest, and it could be regret, disappointment, it could be joy, whatever it is that's at that particular point that ripens. So that's where it's important to examine these ideas, because otherwise they just they're nice theories, nice to know, but to see whether they could have some truth to them. So because I think with the people who are we don't need to say about whether they're religious or not, but who actually live a dog-eat-dog life, effectively they're the top dogs, so they're going to trample over everyone. That's their mindset. So it's not a very considerate one, obviously. and obviously hurts a lot of people along the way. So whether you're Buddhist or not, I don't. It's not a particularly nice. If you're in front of that person, it's not a particularly nice sort of person to be around, I'd imagine. But you'd say, well, all right, whatever they do, they'll reap the results of that either in this life or in the future. So, and look, that person, you might say, oh, they've done a lot of good things for others. So it might not be totally they're going to get a terrible rebirth, whatever. So they might be ruthless, this and that. However, they might say, for example, they looked after their grandmother. They were ruthless to everyone. Their wife, their kids, family, their employees, everyone. But they looked after their grandmother, and so when they died, if that was the karma that ripened the moment they die, you'd say, okay, that could lead to a good rebirth. If that happened. So even you and I, we're carrying a store of karma that's good and positive and negative. So there were these famous teachers or geshis from the past, and they used to carry, I think it was white rocks and black rocks, and they were very, if you like, capable and also very mindful. So they'd go, at the end of the day, I'm going to count the number of good things I did and put the white rocks in my pocket, and the number of bad things I did and count the black rocks in their pocket. Now, pretty hard to do because the day goes quickly. But anyway, they were able to go, oh, well, yeah, there were a couple of things I did that were bad, so there's a couple of black rocks going there. So if you like, we're in the same boat. We're probably creating lots of good things and hopefully not so many bad actions happening. Okay? But if we remember that adage that, positive action will lead to a positive result, and the opposite, the negative action will lead to a negative result, that can actually hold you in good stead, because it actually can stop you from stealing from someone, which is good. You go, oh, I'll take that. And you go, no, I won't. So that's a good outcome. And similarly, that person it looks hungry. Here you go. I'll give them a donation. So it's quite good. So that mindfulness is quite good. So even if we think, oh well, I'm a store of both, we can still do our best to try and make sure that the positive overwhelms the negative, and also what ripens when we die is more positive. So that's one thing we can do as a human being that you'd say an animal probably can't do of its own volition. Definitely those beings who are in the part of the food chain and those miserable rebirths, they're definitely if they're struggling, for example, these hell beings, if they're struggling with being tortured right until they actually do die, there's not much room for anything positive to actually pop up, is there? Yeah, well, true. You might find an example of someone who does create a positive mindset does arise at death, but it's very rare because of that type of the extreme condition they're in. So we use the concept of the suffering of suffering. That's one of the sufferings. So when we're sick with the flu, pneumonia, COVID, you name it, when we're sick with those things, is it easy to be happy? No, it's really hard because we're physically gone. We're delirious, we're fever, hot and cold, everything. It's like, and the last thing most of me is that I can think of is, I've got to keep a happy mind. Just because that suffering of suffering is there, it's just that suffering condition actually permeates everything. So it is quite possible that a hell being could finish off on a good note just when they die, and they go, I remember something good, and that pushes them up, pushes them into a different rebirth. But it's extremely hard. difficult. So sure.
So, does it come down to the intent or the purity of the thought of the person that's connected to? So, if you have someone who's a bad person during their life, and then as they get older or on their deathbed, they suddenly care about how other people feel. But they're doing it out of fear for their own mortality or their own where they're going to end up after they die, and it's not really coming from a place of selflessness or thinking about others. What happens there?
I think that's a hard one to discern, because it's very difficult to sometimes describe the motive of someone who's on a deathbed or sick, very sick, and why they're being so nice to me. They were mean to me for 15 years, and suddenly, you know, they're welcoming me with open arms. I guess, like, I'll just give you an example. So this is, my mum was on very heavy medication for cancer and blood thinners and a few other and they drove her paranoid, made her paranoid, delusional. So you know, the microphones, actually the microphone's not an example, the phone was bugged, the water pipes are bugged, the power line, you know, there's that conspiracy thing happening because of the drugs, you know, that's what brought it on. So that was just before she died. So when she went off the medication, there was like, so she was quite hostile to a few of her children, you know, you tried to kill me. She actually said that. I thought, wow, gosh, did I? I didn't realise I did, but that was, so, you know, she said that to me, and I thought, oh wow, okay. So that shocked me, because I'd never heard that from Mum before, but when she came off that medication just before she died, she was at peace. And so she was able to reconnect with her family. And it was, I thought, from my side, I thought it was genuine. It wasn't like I'm worried about myself and so I'm going to try and reconnect with you. She actually did endeavour to do that. So when Geshe Doga talks about a peaceful mind being a happy mind, for people who are dying, it's said that it's very good if the environment is calm and peaceful and happy for the person who's dying, which is quite different to what we have generally do. We talk about, you know, we're gathered round the person who's dying. We're all bawling. There's a lot of emotion happening, and from a Buddhist perspective, we say that can disturb the person who's dying. If it's too extreme, the person's just going to tap into that and go, it can disturb them. So they say it's better to have a much more peaceful, happy environment for the person who's passing away, because that helps them be at peace themselves, and then that helps them when they die. Yeah, so so what decides what's negative and positive? Okay. Yeah, so we actually don't have any one or any who decides whether something's positive or negative in terms of, there's a creator or someone sitting in judgment on us. So, but effectively, we do have a set of principles in Buddhism that go, okay, these are positive actions and these ones are not positive. There's a negative actions which will lead to a negative result. So, So we talk about generosity. That's an easy one. I think we could all agree if we're generous with good motivation, that's a positive action. Yep. Morality is another one. So if we live a moral, good set of moral code, try and abide by that. They're good actions, because at the moment we're living by that, we're not harming others, because we have a moral perspective on something. I know that I won't do that because that's going to harm that person, so I'll abstain, or whatever it is. So if you react with patience when others are angry, that's considered positive as well. Another one is if we act with enthusiasm and perseverance. So this comes back to having a positive motivation. So if we act like that, then we'll achieve our goal. So they're all positive things. And the other one we talk about is concentration. So if we do something with concentration and it's positively motivated, we'll get a positive result. So whether that's meditating, I'm doing my work, I'm painting, whatever it is, the result will be positive because you're able to set a good motivation and you're able to focus. So that's why concentration is considered one of the tools that we have to use. And then if we look at the opposites, so lying is one, so killing's another one, stealing, so you've already covered that one. I haven't given someone $10, I've stolen $10. So there's a negative action. Engaging in sort of sexual misconduct, so basically taking another's partner, just using that as an example. So that's not a good action, is it? Because that's quite harmful to the other person, the person that you're engaged in a relationship with, etc. So the other one is this one's a little bit topical because it varies a little bit, but it's misusing intoxicants. So these are Buddhist, mind you, these are Buddhist ideas. So you examine them. So this one can cover things like alcohol. So when you take a vow, like I'm not going to misuse that intoxicant alcohol. So you can have it that the Lama might say, okay, that means you don't drink to excess. You don't get blind drunk. So you can have a drink, but you can control it. And then for other people, they might say, I'm not going to have a sip of alcohol ever again. That's their... So would anyone like to talk through why they think that would be, misusing intoxicants would be if you like, a negative action if you performed it? Self-harm, yes. Yep, that's... Yep, harming your body. Alters your mind, yes. Yes. Yep. So once you create... That's a great answer, because I've had one, why stop at one? I'll have more. And the other thing with alcohol particularly, but it could apply to other drugs, is also, as well as harming yourself, you can't, because your inhibitions are lowered, you can harm others more readily. Because I think we've all heard of stories of people, I had a few too many and then I'm going to use this terrible example, then I sexually assaulted that person because they had too many drinks, or whatever it was that just lowered their moral guard. So that's considered one that's okay. It doesn't sound that serious, but it can. You can obviously, if you misuse the intoxicant, then it can. If you do it to an extreme, you can obviously lead to a really bad result.
Does that mean that the concept of illness addiction is not considered an illness?
It is. Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely it's an illness. In Buddhism you'd say it's an illness, definitely. I guess that's the thing. So for someone who's an addict, well, to say alcohol, they can't have a drop because they have the Alcoholics Anonymous, how long have I not been drinking, and they count the days and the years, etc. They know that if they have a drop or a glass, they'll break that sort of mental strength, and then they're back to being an alcoholic. For a lot of us, and I'm not counting myself because I don't drink myself, but you could have a glass of wine, a beer, or whatever, and that's it, or two, whatever, and it won't lead to alcoholism. So it can vary. So definitely it can be an illness. So yeah.
It's also thinking about people who commit crimes as well, mental illness, those sorts of things.
Yeah, it's hard with crimes and mental illness. It's hard to know which one came first. For example, using drugs of dependence, did the drugs of dependence cover up the mental scars that I had, and therefore, but it also made me, commit crime to keep being able to afford those drugs. There's sort of a which came first, quite difficult. And some people, even here, even in this world here, as we know, even in Australia, even in Melbourne, we don't all have a uniform, happy life. Some people have got traumatic pasts, etc. So it's important, without arrogance, that we understand that, and also appreciate that not everyone has it easy. That some people really struggle, either through addiction or mental illness, or both, or a combination of the things. So, sure. Yes. Yep. Yeah. So with these different realms of rebirth, there are realms we can see, like the human realm and the animal realm. Pretty evident to us. The other realms, well, I can't see them. So I'm going, well, what? So then it's important to study them, because then you go, well, what is it? But you could, definitely, if you can't see them, then you can certainly look at where you have examples of almost a hell-like existence where it's unrelenting suffering, and certainly someone with mental illness like schizophrenia, you could say, well, yeah, that they might have a moment of peace or whatever it is, but most of the time it's voices and delusions, and it just seems out of their control. So yes, you could use that. In fact, it is good to do that, because I think if we talk about, there's the hell realms Mark spoke about, without being a doubting Thomas and using a Christian analogy, where's the evidence? So that's a good example. See if you can. No, you're talking about just a state that's characterised by, and definitely that's the case. Like people with mental illness, particularly, if you've got voices popping in your head, and also you're not too sure what's next. It's just then it is sort of an unrelenting mental state. Because I think most of us, we have some control over who we are. We're not hearing another person's voice. We're not dissociating with ourselves. There's a lot of things that we have that keep us level, that there's some, okay. But with the person who's got severe mental illness that can't be treated or can't be treated readily, then for them it is probably moment to moment of different forms of suffering that doesn't seem to have any end. Because even the medications that are given, sometimes they create another side effect, that exacerbates a different problem. So quite hard. So that's important to try and look at some of these different rebirths in terms of what you can see. Um, So, one topic that would be good to cover just before we'll do a bit of meditation is that in Buddhism, we're trying to create a positive result for us in this period of time, and also in our lives. So, we need to then, if we're comfortable with the concepts that Buddhism's presenting, then do we see ourselves as 100% happy now? Like no problems, the mind's totally happy and at peace? Would anyone say that that's the case for them now? No. Momentarily. So it's momentarily is good. I mean, but Buddhism says that that can be stretched out to going momentarily to permanent happiness. So that's the Buddhist goal. And even the Buddha himself started off as like you and me, just a human being on the earth with problems, etc., and developed themselves till they achieved that state of enlightenment. So if he could do it in a human body, in a human form, then the possibility is there for us. So if we can say that we're not totally happy now, then they say that we can look at the Buddha's teachings as the medicine. So, rebirth, karma, the mind, that's the medicine. So if we're taking medicine or we're listening, if we're happy to take it, then we're the patient at that point, because we're saying, okay, I understand it, I can go with that. So I'm going to listen to this and try and understand it. And then the other party to this sort of triumvirate is who's dispensing the medicine. Because we've got the Buddhas past, there's the teachings, the physical teachings or whatever, and then we've got the patient who's receiving, but then we have someone who's actually passing them to you, and we call them in this case, the analogy, just play with it, is the nurse. So you've got a doctor, the Buddha, the medicine is the teachings, and then the nurse is the spiritual community who are passing them on. So you need those three things happening. And first of all, you need a patient who's saying, I'm not 100% well. So if you don't have that, then forget the medicine, forget the nurse. You just say, I don't need any of this because I'm okay, I'm 100% fine. If you have something that, no, this is something I can improve and change and cultivate, then this is what we do. So we talk about this as that acknowledgement, we talk about that as the precursor in taking what the Buddhists call refuge or safe direction. So I'm looking for something that's going to get me out of suffering that's safe direction. So at the beginning, a few of us did some prostrations. So we just prostrate to the Buddha and the teachings and the spiritual community. So we did usually three prostrations. So that's really, I'm taking safe direction. I'm taking safe direction 3 times. So that's important too. So what is it that's reliable that you can rely on to get you there? So if you're a Buddhist, it's those three things. So the Buddha, the teachings, and the spiritual community. Excuse me. So for those of you who are not Buddhist, then you have to examine whether that's true or not. Is it really reliable, or is it unreliable or inconsequential? So that's for each person to examine. And when the prostration occurs, you go down, and you've taken refuge in or safe direction with those, the Buddha, the teachings, and the spiritual community. And then, if you want to be really expand your motivation, when you're coming up, you come up quicker than you went down. And there's a technique that you're going, okay, I'm gonna drag all those beings that are downtrodden and suffering up with me. So just from the up, the motion coming up. So that immediately you've expanded your level of motivation. So that's important as well, because although we can work for our own happiness, and that's very important, we should endeavour to try and expand our scope as best we can. And we'll find that actually helps us. We think, oh no, if I'm totally selfless, that's going to be really tough for me. But what we'll find is, as we become more expansive, it will actually become much easier for us. We're not so egocentric or self-focused. So that's part of this this group of teachings. The Tibetan tradition is talking about expanding your scope to include others. So I think we can just finish with a little bit of meditation, because I know a few of you haven't been before, so we'll do a little bit of breathing meditation. So the most important thing here is to have your back straight. So you can be sitting in a chair or on the cushion. So in our tradition, we put the left hand at the bottom and the right hand on top, and then you join your thumbs and then point your thumbs back towards the navel and sort of put your hand on your lap. So, yeah, like that gentleman there in the blue shirt, if you can see him. So that's really good. So he's back straight. And then, so Geshe Dago said, when you've pointed your thumbs back towards the navel, that helps circulate the flow of energy there. So it immediately brings you some release or peace. So, so your eyes are going to be not shut and not wide open. They're going to just be slightly open to allow the impression of light in. Your mouth's going to be shut because you're going to be breathing through your nostril. So just for a few moments, just breathe in. Visualize that you're breathing in enlightened energy, and you're breathing out any tension or worries or concerns that you have. And then just switch your attention to just the sensation of the breath as it goes in and out through the nostrils. So then when you feel able, just slowly bring your attention back to the room and open your eyes. So as beginners, if you're doing that breathing meditation, it's good to do very short sessions, but be consistent. If you're doing it once a day, do a quick session in the morning or whenever, whatever you feel like. Do it in a nice place that you feel comfortable. And then for consistency, it's good to do it potentially in the same place if that's possible. And we had one fellow mention last week, I think, doing it in somewhere where there's a shrine, but you can have that somewhere that's beautiful, that's a little bit peaceful for yourself. It's good too. It's quite conducive. And then keep the sessions short. Okay, so it gives you a little bit of just finish, and then it'll give you some energy for next time you meditate that you want to actually do it. And that's important for anyone starting out. And then you might think, oh, well, that didn't have any effect. But then over time, you might find that your mind becomes more peaceful and quieter and at ease with itself. Particularly as Westerners, that's quite a novel concept, because we're always on. We've got the phones, we've got the iPad. There's things happening. Everything, there's activity happening all the time. To take a moment where it's a little bit quieter, you're just within yourself, is very good. So does anyone have any more questions tonight? Okay, well, thank you everyone, and enjoy the evening. Good night. Thank you.